Imagine a dive. You've prepared, checked your gear, felt that familiar chill of the water as you descend into a known, albeit challenging, environment.
Right.
But then you don't come back. No body, no clear answers, just a lingering, chilling silence that echoes for years.
Yeah.
That unsettling void, that enduring enigma is precisely what we're plunging into today.
Indeed. We're embarking on a deep dive into one of the most perplexing and, frankly, haunting mysteries in the world of diving.
Which is?
The vanishing of 30-year-old Ben McDaniel, who simply disappeared without a trace at Florida's notorious Vortex Spring back on August 18, 2010.
Right, Vortex Spring.
And this isn't just, a simple missing person case. It's a puzzle that has defied resolution for over a decade now.
Yeah.
It's left this trail of conflicting evidence and just endless speculation.
And our mission today is, well, it's ambitious. We're going to try and sift through this bewildering stack of evidence, these often contradictory eyewitness accounts, and some truly perplexing anomalies surrounding Ben's vanishing.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
Our goal is really to unpack the four main theories. You've got accidental drowning, suicide, maybe a staged disappearance, and the most disturbing one, foul play. And we want to highlight exactly why this case remains such an enduring enigma. We want to give you, our listener, a shortcut to being truly well-informed on one of diving's greatest unresolved mysteries. It's full of surprising facts, insights, things that really challenge the easy answers.
And setting the scene for this mystery is absolutely crucial because the environment itself, Vortex Spring, it's almost like another character in this story.
How so?
Well, while it's visually stunning, crystal clear, cold waters, it hides this extensive and notoriously dangerous underwater cave system.
Okay.
It's a place with a dark, tragic history, a real labyrinth that has claimed many lives before. It demands not just respect, but highly specialized training.
Training that Ben, as we'll find out, didn't actually have, right?
Precisely. Training he simply didn't possess for that kind of environment.
So before we dive into the baffling timeline and the whole missing body issue, let's first unpack who Ben McDaniel actually was.
Great idea.
And what he was truly facing in the weeks leading up to that fateful day. Because this isn't just some quirky detail about him. This feels like the central puzzle piece that kind of twists every theory we're about to explore.
It really does shape everything.
So Ben was a man in his prime, just 30 years old, from Memphis, Tennessee. He was the eldest of three sons from what sounds like a financially secure family.
Right, a fairly stable background on the surface.
But what truly stands out about Ben is his lifelong connection to the water. He'd been a certified open water ski day diver since he was just, 14?
Yeah, since his teens. Very young.
And by all accounts, friends and family described him as fearless with this profound, almost innate passion for diving. It clearly shaped a huge part of his identity.
That profound passion for diving, though, it was set against this really jarring backdrop of significant and accumulating personal turmoil.
Okay, like what?
Well, in the period leading up to his disappearance, Ben was dealing with a recent divorce. That's always a major life stressor for anyone.
Whereas,
On top of that, his construction business, which was a big part of his professional identity, it had failed.
oh, wow.
And that left him with a substantial debt. We're talking $50,000 in tax debt to the IRS.
$50,000. That's serious pressure.
These aren't just minor inconveniences, right? These were major blows to his sense of stability, his future prospects, his, personal efficacy. He was basically facing this trifecta of personal and financial collapse.
And then there's the shadow of grief. That really looms over Ben's story, doesn't it? A wound that was still agonizingly fresh.
Absolutely. Just 2 years prior, back in 2008, his younger brother, Paul, had tragically died. He was only 22.
So young.
And it wasn't a slow decline. It was sudden and traumatic. While initially reported as a stroke, the true cause of Paul's death was later revealed as a drug overdose.
Oh, man.
Specifically, it was a lack of oxygen to the brain, medically termed anoxic encephalopathy, caused by a mix of opiate and benzodiazepine toxicity.
And Ben found him.
What's crucial here is that Ben himself had found Paul unconscious and had actively, desperately tried to revive him.
I can't even imagine that.
And he even became deeply involved in fundraising for stroke research afterwards, which, speaks volumes about the depth of his grief and his attempt to find some meaning or some positive outlet in the wake of such a traumatic, unexpected loss.
To witness that, to be involved in that desperate struggle, and then to carry that burden, it's just truly unimaginable.
It creates this critical psychological paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
On one hand, you have this profound accumulation of stressors. Failed marriage, business collapse, crushing debt, and the deep, maybe unresolved trauma of his brother's overdose.
Right.
Any one of those could drive a person to despair, or at least to a state of deep despondency. Yet, here's where it gets really fascinating. His parents and his girlfriend, Emily Greer, they both described him as appearing remarkably optimistic in the weeks right before he vanished.
Optimistic. How so?
He was talking about getting instructor certification, actively researching legitimate cave diving certification, even planning to start a new diving-related business.
So looking forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He even left this heartfelt thank you letter for his parents, expressing gratitude and, forward-looking intentions. This stark contrast between his outward presentation and his underlying struggles is absolutely crucial when we start to analyze the different theories.
Was it a mask? Was it a genuine turning point? Or was it something else entirely? It makes you wonder what was truly going on beneath the surface.
Precisely. That contradiction is key.
It's almost like two different people are being described, isn't it? The one grappling with immense personal pain burdened by grief and debt, and the one looking brightly towards a new future in the very activity he loved. It's a contradiction that just screams for an explanation.
It really does.
So, with that complex picture of Ben in mind, let's turn our attention back to the stage for this mystery. Vortex Spring itself. You've mentioned it's both beautiful and deadly. Can you paint a clearer picture of this environment for us, especially for listeners who might not be familiar with deep spring diving?
Absolutely. Visually, Vortex Spring is stunning. It's a cold, freshwater spring, stays at a remarkably consistent 68 degrees Fahrenheit year-round.
Brisk.
Yeah, definitely chilly. And it churns out an incredible 28 million gallons of crystal clear water every single day. The main basin, it's about 200 feet deep with gently sloping sides.
Okay.
But the real allure and the real danger lies in its extensive underwater cave system. This system connects to the vast Floridan aquifer. It's staggering, really, 1,642 feet long.
That's over a quarter of a mile of underwater tunnels. That's way beyond a casual recreational dive.
Oh, absolutely. Way beyond. The cavern entrance itself is relatively large, maybe 9 by 12 feet, and it's situated a manageable 58 feet below the surface. There's even a handrail along the wall for divers.
Okay, so far so good.
The cave is technically navigable, meaning you can explore it down to a depth of 310 feet. However, beyond that depth, further passage is completely blocked by a steel grate.
A grate, like permanently sealed.
Yeah, a solid steel barrier. And critically, even for divers who are experienced and properly certified for cave diving, there's a strict, established limit. They're typically only permitted to explore down to a maximum depth of 115 feet.
And why 115 feet?
That's where a heavily reinforced security gate is located.
Okay. So that security gate sounds absolutely critical. It's clearly there for a very serious reason, especially given the dark past you hinted at earlier. Was it put there because of a history of accidents?
It is absolutely critical, yes.
Yeah.
And yes, it was a direct response to tragedy. Vortex Spring has a grim and, frankly, well-documented history of fatalities.
How bad?
In the early 1990s alone, 13 divers died while exploring that very cave system.
13, wow.
Yeah, 13 deaths. This grim statistic became so concerning that the state of Florida actually considered banning diving near cave entrances altogether.
I can see why.
So, in direct response to these frequent, often preventable accidents, the local diving community developed these highly specialized cave diving certification standards. These eventually became the globally recognized requirement for accessing these particularly hazardous overhead environments.
Makes sense.
And Vortex Spring, to its credit, implemented these new safety standards by installing that very locked underwater gate at 115 feet. Access was meant to be strictly controlled.
How so?
You had to possess a valid cave diving certificate to get past it. And a staff member was legally required to unlock the gate and, ideally, accompany you during the dive to make sure you followed safety protocols.
Okay, so they had these ironclad rules born from immense tragedy, designed specifically to protect divers, literally a matter of life and death.
Correct.
But what happened the night Ben disappeared? Was he a certified cave diver? Did he just ignore the rules again?
This is where it gets really interesting, and it highlights a critical breach, a fundamental failure of those exact safety protocols. Ben McDaniel was explicitly not certified for cave diving. This is a non-negotiable point. He did not have the training.
Right.
However, he had been observed by staff and other divers before August 18th on multiple occasions, gaining unauthorized access to that restricted area.
How?
By simply forcing open the gate. He was known for this reckless behavior, apparently. He'd jimmy it open.
Okay, so he had a history of breaking the rules there.
Yes, And then, on the night of August 18th, 2010, an employee named Eduardo Terran, who knew Ben wasn't certified, knew his history of tampering with the gate. He actually unlocked the gate for Ben.
Wait, what? An employee unlocked it for him?
He made the conscious decision to open that barrier, knowing Ben wasn't qualified to go beyond it.
So an employee, knowing Ben was uncertified, knowing he had a history of bypassing safety measures, actively enabled him to enter a highly dangerous, restricted zone.
That's what's reported.
What was the rationale there? I mean, what did Terran say? Why would he do that?
Terran reportedly stated that he did this because he was, quote, fearing Ben would get tangled up and drown if he attempted to force his way through the gate again, like he'd done before.
Okay, hold on. So, to prevent Ben from maybe getting tangled forcing the gate, he let him into the cave system he wasn't trained for, where the risk of drowning was arguably much, much higher.
Think about that for a moment. An attempt to mitigate one perceived immediate risk. Ben getting tangled trying to force the gate inadvertently enabled a far greater known risk.
Yeah.
Entering a dangerous cave system without the proper training, without the right equipment, without the crucial safety protocols in place. This action directly facilitated Ben's entry into a hazardous zone for which he was unequivocally unqualified.
That's a massive lapse in judgment, or maybe even negligence. It's a central, deeply troubling, and still unanswered question in the case, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It fundamentally undermines the very safety measures designed to prevent fatalities at Vortex Spring. And it directly opens the door to the tragedy that followed, whatever that tragedy ultimately was.
That's astonishing. It just creates this complete failure point in the safety system, directly enabling Ben to be in a place he absolutely should never have been allowed to be.
Precisely.
This breach alone just raises so many questions, regardless of what ultimately happened to Ben. It's a key part of how this mystery unfolded, a true starting point for all the questions that follow.
Definitely a critical factor.
Now that we understand Ben's profound personal struggles, the dangerous environment of Vortex Spring, and that frankly shocking safety breach, let's piece together the timeline of his final known hours.
Okay.
Then we'll examine the extensive search that followed and the truly baffling lack of a body. It's mind-boggling.
It really is.
So leading up to that day, Ben had moved to his parents' beach home in Florida back in April 2010. It was meant to be a sabbatical, right? A period to help him cope with those recent personal setbacks we talked about.
Yeah, a fresh start, maybe find some peace.
He quickly became a familiar face at Vortex Spring. But in the weeks before August 18th, staff members, including Eduardo Terran, apparently frequently observed him jimmying or forcing open that locked gate.
Bypassing all the safety protocols.
Right. There was even a suspicion among the staff and maybe other divers that Ben had planned a big dive, specifically for later in the evening, after other divers had left.
So he could explore without being seen, breaking into the restricted area. He clearly had an intent to go deep, or at least beyond the gate.
And this sets the stage for a deliberate, if incredibly risky, venture.
Then, in mid-August 2010, just about a week before he disappeared, Ben actually went back to Tennessee for a visit.
Right, and this is when his parents and girlfriend noticed his apparent optimism.
Exactly. He was discussing those plans for instructor certification, researching legitimate cave diving courses, even talking about starting a new diving business, and he left that thank you letter for his parents.
This period of outward optimism, these tangible plans for the future, it makes the events of August 18th even more perplexing, doesn't it? More contradictory.
Absolutely. It deepens the paradox.
So what happened that specific day? What was the precise sequence of events on August 18th, 2010 that kicked this whole mystery off?
Okay, so on that Wednesday, security cameras at the dive shop recorded Ben making a transaction, filling his tanks. Standard procedure. He then reportedly spent much of the afternoon alone down by the spring, meticulously testing his equipment, making detailed notes in his dive log.
So it sounds like a methodical, planned approach, not just some spontaneous, reckless decision.
It suggests planning, yes. Then, around 7:30 p.m., just as the sun was setting, Ben prepared for another dive. He made a phone call to his mother on his cell phone.
And that was his last known contact with family.
That's right, his last known contact. He then entered the spring. As he was going in, he passed two divers who were on their way out.
And one of them was?
One of these divers was, critically, Eduardo Terran, the commercial diver employed by Vortex Spring.
The same guy.
The same guy? As we've discussed, Terran, aware of Ben's uncertified status and his history of forcing the gate, made that conscious decision to unlock the gate to the restricted cave section for Ben.
And that was the last time anyone saw Ben McDaniel alive.
That was the last time Ben McDaniel was seen alive.
Yeah.
And crucially, Eduardo and the other diver, they didn't wait around to observe Ben's decompression bubbles at the surface.
Which is standard procedure, right? To make sure the diver came up okay.
It's the standard expected sign that a diver has completed their dive safely and successfully ascended. But they didn't wait. They just left.
Wow. So Ben enters the cave, the gate is unlocked for him by an employee, and then 2 whole days pass before anyone even realizes something is wrong.
Yeah.
That's not just a significant delay. That feels almost unbelievable given the circumstances at a dive site like that.
It is a very significant and deeply troubling delay. On August 19th, the day after Ben was last seen, his truck remained in the parking lot.
Just sitting there.
Just sitting there. But its presence went completely unnoticed by the dive shop staff throughout the entire day.
How is that possible?
That's one of the many questions. It wasn't until August 20th, a full 2 days after he was last seen, that employees finally noticed his truck hadn't moved, still sitting there, and recognized that something was amiss.
And then they reported him missing.
It was then that Eduardo Terran, the very same employee who unlocked the gate for him, reported Ben missing.
Okay. So what happened next? The police get involved.
Immediately following that report, Holmes County Sheriff's deputies arrived, sealed off the spring with crime scene tape, and initiated what would become a massive, truly unprecedented recovery effort.
And what did that search actually entail? I mean, we're talking about a complex, confined underwater environment. What kind of resources, what level of expertise did they bring in? This wasn't just a few local divers chipping in, was it?
Oh, no, absolutely not. This was no ordinary search. Over 16 renowned volunteer recovery cave divers were involved. Yeah, these are considered some of the most experienced and skilled individuals in the world in this highly specialized, very dangerous field. They participated in nearly non-stop dives.
For how long?
They meticulously explored every nook and cranny within the furthest and deepest accessible areas of the cave system. These intensive efforts continued for an astonishing 36 consecutive days.
36 days. Over a month.
Over a month of highly skilled professionals dedicating themselves, often at great personal risk, to finding any trace of Ben.
And despite all of that, despite the world-class expertise and the relentless dedication, the core of the mystery, the truly unfathomable absence, they found nothing.
No trace of Ben's body was found. This is where it truly defies belief for many people, the central paradox of this entire case.
It's staggering.
It is. The most perplexing and confounding aspect of the entire investigation is that no physical trace of Ben's body was ever located. Many of the professional search divers involved in the operation, they expressed their professional expert opinion.
Which was?
That if Ben had died in the cave, his body was simply not present within the accessible sections they searched.
And why did they think that?
They pointed out Ben's physical stature. He was a big guy, over 6 feet tall, weighed about 210 pounds.
Right.
Which would make it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for him to enter the narrower, truly inaccessible passages where maybe a body could remain hidden indefinitely. This wasn't just a guess. It was an assessment based on their extensive firsthand experience in these specific types of extreme environments.
Okay, so if he wasn't in the accessible parts of the cave, what about outside the cave? Did they search on land? Because you'd expect them to check every possible avenue.
Yes, absolutely. The search efforts extended far beyond the underwater environment. An extensive above-ground search was also conducted.
Using what methods?
They utilized highly trained cadaver dogs, scent tracking dogs, teams mounted on horseback, even a helicopter.
Pretty
thorough. Ben's father, Shelby, actually recounted a specific anecdote. He said one cadaver dog reportedly hit on the surface of the water near the cave entrance, then jumped in and started swimming towards the cave.
Wow. So the family probably took that as strong evidence he was in the cave.
Exactly. The handler allegedly told Shelby that this behavior was highly unusual for that particular dog, which the family interpreted as strong evidence Ben's body was indeed in the cave, just perhaps unreachable. But it's crucial to note that other experts have questioned the reliability of that specific dog group in this context. They explain that cadaver and tracking dogs aren't infallible.
Right.
They can sometimes alert to please their handler, or simply due to excitement, or maybe even to residual sense in a complex outdoor environment like that.
So not definitive proof.
Not definitive. And despite these extensive efforts, including an exhaustive search along Blue Creek, which is where the spring's water eventually flows, down to the Choctawhatchee River and the surrounding woods, No evidence of Ben was found anywhere.
And what makes this even more unsettling is the complete lack of any signs of decomposition inside the cave itself. No
Right.
bacteria, no fish activity you'd typically expect over time if a body had been trapped there. That's a very specific technical detail, but it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
This absence is profoundly significant. If Ben had simply drowned and remained trapped within the accessible parts of the cave, you'd typically expect some physical indication over time. Scavengers, bacterial blooms, changes in water chemistry around, decaying organic matter.
But there was none of that.
None reported. The inability of expert divers to locate him, coupled with their professional assessment of his size versus the cave's tightest spots, it necessitates a critical reevaluation of that initial assumption of accidental drowning.
So what does it imply?
It strongly implies that either the body is in an exceptionally inaccessible place beyond current search capabilities, or, more controversially, that Ben was never in the cave in the way everyone assumed. Or, most disturbingly, that his body was removed. This persistent, absolute lack of a body significantly weakens the straightforward accidental drowning theory and lends considerable weight to the alternative explanations.
Like a staged disappearance or foul play?
Exactly. It fundamentally shifts the investigative focus from where is he to the far more complex and unsettling question of why is there no trace where he should be?
This complete lack of a body is the central paradox, but it's far from the only one, is it? The Ben McDaniel case is just riddled with anomalies, details that simply don't fit.
Absolutely.
And these contradictions are precisely what shaped the leading theories. Let's start with what was found, or maybe what wasn't found, in Ben's truck when the police finally arrived 2 days later.
Okay.
When the Holmes County Sheriff's deputies sealed off the spring, Ben's wetsuit, his tanks, his primary diving equipment, they were noticeably absent from his truck.
Which is odd in itself. Where did his gear go?
Exactly. But here's the crucial contradiction, the bit that makes you really scratch your head. His wallet, containing nearly $1,100 in cash.
Wow, that much cash.
Yeah, almost $1,100. And his cell phone. They were found inside the cab of his truck.
Okay, that is a critical detail.
Yeah.
And it creates this fascinating, almost infuriating puzzle depending on which theory you're looking at.
How so? Explain that.
Well, think about it. For a staged disappearance, right, someone intending to vanish, start a new life, you would logically expect them to take their money and their phone, their means of communication.
Absolutely. Essential items.
Leaving nearly $1,100 in cash and a cell phone behind is highly illogical, maybe even reckless, for someone planning to disappear. It directly contradicts that narrative.
Okay, so it argues against him just running off.
It makes that harder to believe, yes.
Yeah.
However, if foul play occurred on land, maybe near the truck, leaving these items behind could be a deliberate act by perpetrators.
Like a misdirection.
Exactly. Intended to make it appear as if Ben went on a dive and simply vanished underwater, framing the situation. And if he simply drowned accidentally, well, then leaving his wallet and phone in the truck would be entirely natural. You don't dive with those things.
Right.
So this specific detail, the wallet and phone being left behind, it heavily weighs against a simple, careless, staged disappearance without any external help. It pushes investigators back towards considering accidental drowning, suicide, or foul play, where the presence of these items is either irrelevant or, more sinisterly, a deliberate plant.
It's like a riddle where each piece of the puzzle seems to fit a different explanation, but none fit perfectly with everything else.
Precisely.
It's a key piece of evidence that just screams manipulation, doesn't it? Whether by Ben himself or by someone else.
It definitely raises that possibility strongly.
But perhaps the most talked about, the most baffling piece of physical evidence are those recovered tanks. You called it the smoking gun earlier. What was so unusual, so fundamentally wrong about them?
This is truly the most anomalous and significant piece of physical evidence we have in this case. 3 tanks, believed to belong to Ben McDaniel, were recovered.
Where were they found?
2 were found near the entrance to the cave.
Okay.
Now, this already struck some searchers as inconsistent with standard cave diving practice. Normally, extra air tanks, used for decompression stops on the way up, are typically placed at strategic points along the exit route.
Right, as a safety measure on the way out.
Exactly. Not just dumped at the entrance. But then a 3rd tank, a standard aluminum 80 tank, was found full and with a regulator attached, 200 feet inside the cave.
200 feet deep. That's well beyond recreational limits.
Way beyond typical recreational limits, yes. And deeper than that 115-foot gate. And then, to make it even stranger, 2 other tanks were found without regulators.
Meaning you couldn't breathe from them?
Correct. They were found attached to something called a talk box. It's basically an inverted metal box that traps air, allowing divers inside it to take out their regulators and talk for short periods.
Where was this talk box?
In the outer cavern area, sometimes called the piano room, which is before you get to the really restricted parts.
So a really confusing arrangement. 2 near the entrance, 1 deep inside with a regulator, and some other tanks without regulators attached to this talk box thing.
A very strange setup.
But then there's the gas problem, isn't there? This is the detail that really threw expert divers for a loop, the one that seems impossible to explain away.
Yes, and this is the absolute kicker. The detail that fundamentally breaks the simple accident narrative. All recovered tanks contained normal air.
Just regular compressed air, like you'd use for shallow diving.
Exactly. They did not contain the specialized gas mixtures, things like nitrox or trimix, that are absolutely essential and, frankly, legally required for diving safely at the depths Ben was reportedly exploring and researching within that cave.
Why is normal air so bad at depth?
Normal air at those depths becomes highly toxic. You get severe nitrogen narcosis, which deeply impairs judgment, like being drunk underwater.
Not good in a cave.
Extremely dangerous. And you also risk oxygen toxicity, which can cause sudden convulsions and death without warning. Using normal air that deep is a fatal error for someone who had even briefly researched cave diving, let alone someone planning a deep expedition like Ben apparently was.
So why is this so profoundly anomalous? Why does this make it so unlikely that this was just a simple, accidental, deep cave dive gone wrong? Why does it demand an explanation beyond just bad luck or a mistake?
Because it's fundamentally inconsistent with any experienced diver undertaking a legitimate, planned, deep cave exploration. Standard practice dictates specific tank placements for safety, not just randomly at the entrance.
Right.
But the use of normal air for that kind of depth, it's a fatal known error. It's diving 101 for technical diving.
Yeah.
Someone who had researched cave diving, as Ben reportedly had, would absolutely know this. It's inconceivable they wouldn't.
So what does it suggest, then?
This setup, therefore, strongly suggests one of 2 things. Either, 1, the tanks were staged by Ben himself to create the illusion of a diving accident.
To fake his death?
Perhaps. Maybe he used rental side-mount tanks for his actual dive or escape. Tanks that could be returned later unnoticed, allowing him to vanish and making this staged scene look like the accident. This aligns with the faked death theory.
Okay.
Or 2, the tanks were placed there by others as part of a foul play scenario to fabricate a diving accident narrative after Ben was potentially murdered elsewhere or his body removed from the water.
To cover up a crime.
Precisely. This evidence directly contradicts the most straightforward explanation in accidental drowning during a proper, albeit uncertified, deep dive. It implies a conscious effort to mislead investigators.
That's why you call it the smoking gun.
It is the closest thing to a smoking gun in this case, exactly because it demands an explanation beyond simple misfortune. It points directly to a deliberate act, either by Ben or by someone else.
It's a deliberate act, then. A key piece of the puzzle that just screams manipulation. Now, what about Ben's dive logs and any security footage? Did they offer any clarity, or did they just add more questions to the pile?
Well, Ben's dive logs, they indicated that he had explored the cave quite extensively. A map he created himself was also discovered.
So he knew the layout.
It suggests he did. Jill Heinerth, who's a highly respected cave diver and explorer, even made a documentary about this case. She initially believed Ben hadn't really explored the cave's furthest reaches.
Why'd she change her mind?
Yeah, after reviewing his logbook, she reconsidered. She noted that they indicated he was meticulously mapping the cave and had made at least one dive previously to its furthest reaches.
So that suggests a meticulous, dedicated approach, maybe a deeper understanding of the cave than people first thought.
Exactly. A deeper engagement and knowledge of the cave's layout than maybe a casual, uncertified diver might possess. This level of intimate knowledge could have been crucial for someone planning an elaborate staged disappearance, or even a suicide in an unrecoverable spot.
Right, it complicates the narrative that he was just some reckless novice stumbling around.
It does. As for security cameras, they recorded Ben making that transaction, filling his tanks at the dive shop earlier in the day.
Anything else? Anything suspicious?
Reportedly, they showed nothing suspicious regarding his final entry into the water or any subsequent events. Although, it's worth noting, some theorists have raised the possibility of footage being manipulated, or maybe even omitted by employees. But there's no proof of that.
So the logs show he knew the cave, perhaps intimately well, but the cameras don't show much else useful. It all keeps spiraling back to those tanks, doesn't it?
They really do.
They're the clearest physical anomaly that defies a simple explanation, forcing us to consider something far more complex is going on here.
Agreed. They are central to why this case remains so perplexing.
Okay, we've laid out the complex character of Ben McDaniel, the perilous setting of Vortex Spring, the baffling timeline, and those truly anomalous pieces of evidence like the tanks and the wallet.
Hmm.
Now, let's really try to deconstruct the four leading theories, starting with the most straightforward, perhaps, yet maybe the least likely when you dig into it: accidental drowning or entrapment.
Right, the simplest explanation on the surface.
This theory basically suggests that Ben, while diving, simply succumbed to an accident, got trapped, maybe disoriented, ran out of air, and drowned within the cave's complex passages.
And there are certainly arguments that initially lend some credibility to this idea. First and foremost, Ben unequivocally lacked the specialized certification required for cave diving.
We know that for sure.
We do. And cave diving is an extremely technical and inherently dangerous activity. This lack of certification would significantly increase his risk of an accident. He likely wouldn't have the specific training, the right equipment knowledge, or the emergency procedures needed for those overhead environments.
Makes sense. What else?
Furthermore, the Vortex Spring cave system itself is notoriously dangerous. We mentioned that documented history of 13 fatalities back in the early 90s. It earned its reputation as a diver graveyard for a reason.
It's not a forgiving place.
Not at all. The cave features tight passages, restrictions, areas with strong currents, things that can pose significant challenges even for highly experienced certified divers. Ben also vanished at a depth well past the recreational limit, beyond that 115-foot gate within this complex system, and he was diving alone.
Which is a huge no-no in cave diving, right?
A cardinal sin. It's a severe safety violation because there's nobody there to assist you in an emergency. Disorientation, equipment malfunction, running out of air, simply getting lost. These are all common and often fatal risks in such environments, particularly for an uncertified diver operating alone in an unfamiliar deep system.
So on the surface, it sounds like a tragic, albeit perhaps predictable, diving accident. It makes sense initially.
It seems plausible at first glance, yes.
But what are the arguments against this theory? Because it feels like the evidence stacks up pretty quickly against it, doesn't it, when you look closer?
They absolutely do stack up against it, and that's why this theory, despite its initial plausibility, really starts to unravel under scrutiny.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The overwhelming counter-evidence starts with those exhaustive searches. Despite more than 16 highly experienced volunteer recovery, divers meticulously exploring every nook and cranny for 36 straight days.
Right, the massive search effort.
No trace of Ben's body was found within the cave. That is highly unusual for a drowning in a confined system where a body would typically be found eventually or become trapped by currents or the geology.
And the divers themselves didn't think he was in the accessible parts.
Many of those professional search divers, based on their expertise, believed Ben, being over 6 feet tall and 210 pounds, was simply too large physically to have entered the narrower, truly inaccessible passages where a body might remain hidden indefinitely.
Okay, what else?
Furthermore, there was that complete absence of decomposition signs within the cave. No markings on the cave floor suggesting disturbance, no reported bacterial activity, no unusual fish activity indicating a decaying body.
Which you'd expect over 36 days plus the initial delay.
You'd expect something. If he had simply drowned and remained there, some physical indication would typically appear over time. And then, most critically, there are those highly anomalous tank discoveries we keep coming back to.
The wrong gas, the weird placement.
Exactly. The suspicious placement of tanks near the entrance, not along planned exit routes, and their contents of normal air, not the specialized gas mixture required for that depth. This is fundamentally inconsistent with a planned, even if ill-fated, deep cave dive by someone who had researched the subject, like Ben apparently had.
So, while the dangerous environment and Ben's lack of certification initially make accidental drowning seem tragically plausible,
Right.
the complete baffling lack of a body and those highly anomalous equipment findings essentially dismantle a simple accident theory. If he were trapped, his body probably should have been found, and those tanks just make no sense for that scenario.
Precisely. It means we have to look elsewhere, towards more complex and, frankly, unsettling possibilities. It becomes less a question of if he drowned in an accident, and more a question of what happened to the body and why the scene looked the way it did.
Which brings us squarely to theory number 2, suicide. Now, given Ben's extensive personal struggles, we talked about the recent divorce, the failed business, the significant tax debt, and most profoundly, the traumatic, drug-related death of his younger brother Paul just 2 years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly plausible that he was under immense psychological pressure. These are all profound stressors that could potentially lead someone to suicidal ideation.
Arguments for this theory would suggest that Ben might have intentionally sought out an unrecoverable part of the cave while diving alone, perhaps squeezing into a tight, inaccessible space knowing he wouldn't be able to get back out.
Intentionally trapping himself.
Or deliberately entering an area where retrieval would be impossible. Some areas of that cave system truly remain unexplored due to extreme difficulty and danger, even for the most highly experienced divers.
Yeah.
His decision to dive alone, despite the known dangers and the potential availability of dive partners, could also be interpreted as a deliberate choice, maybe to ensure no one could intervene or rescue him. The cave, in this scenario, becomes a tool for a final, unrecoverable act.
Ensuring his body would never be found? Sparing his family that particular agony, maybe?
Possibly. Sparing them the recovery of a body, perhaps, but certainly not sparing them the agony of the unknown.
That's a dark thought. To intentionally choose such a final, hidden resting place, it would certainly fit the lack of a body being found.
It would explain the absence, yes.
But then we have to grapple with the human element again, and the arguments against this theory, which seem quite strong and very contradictory. What are they?
The most significant counter-evidence here is that profound psychological paradox we discussed earlier. His parents and his girlfriend reported that he appeared optimistic.
Right, making plans.
Actively making plans for instructor certification, a new diving business, leaving that heartfelt thank you letter expressing future intentions. This outward display of positivity significantly contradicts a typical suicidal mindset, making this theory far less straightforward than if he had just vanished without any preceding signs of hope or future planning.
It doesn't fit the profile they saw.
It doesn't seem to. Furthermore, his family vehemently rejected this theory. They pointed to his rescued chocolate Labrador, a beloved pet he reportedly adored, and his girlfriend Emily, as reasons he would not knowingly subject them to such profound grief and uncertainty, especially after witnessing firsthand the devastating impact his brother Paul's death had on the family.
That makes sense. He wouldn't want to put them through that again.
That was their strong feeling. Also, while it doesn't directly disprove suicide, leaving behind that significant amount of cash, nearly $1,100, and his cell phone in his truck, is still an unusual detail for someone planning their final moment.
Why leave the money?
Unless it was a deliberate choice to just cut all ties immediately and leave no trace of contact with the world. But even then, why leave such a large sum of easily portable cash? It feels off.
So, while the deep personal struggles provide a potential, albeit unconfirmed, motive for suicide, the reported optimism and the nature of his personal ties make this theory less compelling. It would require us to assume this hidden, profound despair that wasn't outwardly visible at all. A very private, desperate act carried out with incredible secrecy. It still feels like a major contradiction.
Indeed, it asks us to believe in a complete internal contradiction, where his outward persona masks something entirely different, something he hid successfully, even from those closest to him, right before he disappeared.
Okay, that leads us logically to theory number 3, a staged disappearance. This theory suggests that Ben McDaniel meticulously faked his own death to escape his life and its crushing Bradens.
It's a classic motive, isn't it? It is a classic motive, yes. His financial troubles, specifically that crippling $50,000 tax debt to the IRS and the failure of his construction business, they certainly provide a strong motive to just vanish and start over with a clean slate somewhere else.
A powerful incentive to disappear.
Absolutely. The financial and personal pressures were immense, creating a compelling reason to escape. And remember those anomalous tank discoveries we detailed earlier?
Yeah, the weird setup.
They could very well be interpreted as a deliberate attempt by Ben himself to stage a diving accident.
How would that work?
If, for instance, he used rental side mount tanks for his actual exit or maybe even another dive, those could potentially have been returned unnoticed later on. It would further obscure his tracks and make the accident scene with the recovered tanks look more authentic, more plausible.
Okay, so the tanks could fit this theory too.
They could. And that 2-day delay in reporting his absence, during which his truck went unnoticed, that provided a significant window of opportunity.
Time to get away.
Time for him to exit the water safely, maybe dispose of any personal diving gear he didn't want found, and leave the area without immediate detection. And his detailed knowledge of the cave, which we know he had from his dive logs and map making.
Right. He knew the place.
That knowledge could have aided him in planning an elaborate exit strategy, maybe one that would mislead any search efforts, ensuring that attempts to find him in the cave would be fruitless.
So all the pieces of a classic skip town or faked death scenario could be there. You've got the motive, the opportunity, even a potential method for faking his death using the tanks.
The elements are potentially there, yes.
But what's the fatal flaw in this theory? Because it seems like there's one glaring contradiction that many people point to, the one that just doesn't add up.
There is, and it's a major one. Arguably the most significant flaw in the staged disappearance theory: the presence of his wallet, containing nearly $1,100 in cash, and his cell phone, left behind in the cab of his truck.
Right, back to the wallet and phone. Why is that so critical here?
Because for a person faking their death to start a new life, they would almost certainly take those essential financial resources and their means of communication. Leaving them behind is highly illogical if you're planning to disappear and establish a new identity somewhere else. It's a significant oversight for someone attempting a meticulous escape.
You'd need the cash, you'd need the phone, at least initially.
It'd almost certainly take them. Furthermore, his family, again, vehemently rejected this theory. They pointed to his rescued dog, his girlfriend, and his awareness of the profound grief his brother's death had caused. They just doubted he would knowingly inflict that kind of prolonged agony of the unknown on them.
And the optimism again.
And his reported optimism and future plans also contradict the idea of just abandoning his entire life. Plus, significantly, there have been 0 confirmed sightings of Ben McDaniel anywhere since his disappearance.
Which is unusual for faked deaths.
While not impossible, it is unusual for someone faking their death to remain completely unseen, especially given the public nature of this case over the years. Someone usually slips up eventually.
So, while the anomalous tanks strongly suggest some form of staging happened,
Yes, staging seems likely.
the fact that he left behind crucial financial resources makes the careless escape aspect implausible. If it was a perfectly planned fake death, why leave the money and phone? This internal contradiction weakens the staged disappearance theory significantly.
It does.
And it naturally leads us to question who performed the staging if it wasn't Ben himself trying to escape.
Which brings us, inevitably, to the most disturbing and arguably the strongest contender among the theories when you weigh all the evidence: foul play or murder.
Right. This theory proposes that Ben McDaniel was a victim of foul play, either during or perhaps after his dive, and his body was subsequently hidden or removed to cover up the crime.
Correct.
This theory truly gains significant traction from the convergence of several highly suspicious elements that just feel wrong about the official narrative.
There are several factors that point in this direction.
Let's start with the private investigator hired by the McDaniel family. They looked deep into this, right? What was their conclusion?
The private investigator became firmly convinced that Ben's body may have been removed from the scene before any authorities were ever contacted.
Okay.
Or, even more sinisterly, that he may have been murdered on land, perhaps near the spring or his truck, and the whole narrative of his diving disappearance was fabricated as a cover story.
And that would fit with the tank evidence?
It aligns perfectly with the suspicious tank placement and contents. The anomalous nature of those recovered tanks, the normal air, the unusual locations, some even without regulators, could be strong evidence of a scene deliberately manipulated.
By someone else?
By someone else, yes. To make it appear as a diving accident rather than a genuine dive gone wrong, it suggests a conscious, deliberate effort by someone other than Ben to mislead investigators and deflect suspicion away from what really happened.
And then there's a really unsettling background of a former Vortex Spring owner. That's a truly disturbing detail that adds a kind of sinister layer to the whole situation. What do we know about him?
Indeed, it's a troubling connection. A former owner of Vortex Spring was implicated in the alleged kidnapping and assault of a temporary employee right around the same time frame as Ben's disappearance.
Seriously? Kidnapping and assault?
That was the allegation. This individual eventually pleaded no contest to lesser charges, resulting in a fine and probation, which still indicates legal culpability for something serious.
Okay, wow.
Furthermore, this same man reportedly passed away under suspicious circumstances himself, just about a month after the Ben McDaniel case started gaining significant public attention.
Passed away suspiciously. What does that mean?
The details are murky, but his death was considered unusual by some. Now, this background suggests a potentially volatile individual with a direct, recent connection to the dive site and a documented history of serious legal trouble. It adds a very dark and unsettling undercurrent to the entire case.
It doesn't prove anything about Ben, but it certainly raises a lot of uncomfortable questions about the environment Ben was frequenting, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It paints a picture of potential danger connected to the location itself.
And what about the employees themselves? We've talked about Eduardo Taran unlocking the gate, enabling Ben to enter that restricted area. Is there a theory of employee culpability here? Because that 2-day delay in noticing the truck feels so critical.
There absolutely is a theory involving employees, and it's a prominent, persistent one among those who follow the case closely. The actions of the employees, particularly Eduardo Taran unlocking the gate for Ben, despite his lack of certification, have been viewed with deep suspicion by many.
So what's the theory?
A leading theory suggests that employees may have found Ben's body, perhaps after an accidental drowning that did occur, but they discovered him, panicked, and subsequently moved his body.
Why would they do that?
To avoid blame, or more likely, to avoid negative publicity for the spring. This is particularly plausible given Vortex Springs' history of fatalities and the very real potential for the park to face severe consequences, including permanent closure if another death occurred under such questionable circumstances, especially involving an uncertified diver they led into the cave.
And the 2-day delay.
That 2-day delay in noticing Ben's truck provided a crucial, ample window for such a cover-up to be executed discreetly. It gave them time to remove a body, maybe clean up, or manipulate evidence like the tanks.
And what about his missing gear? The wetsuit, the tanks not being in the truck.
Exactly. If Ben's wetsuit and other primary diving equipment were not present at his truck when police arrived, as reported, that could suggest they were taken or disposed of by someone else. Perhaps to conceal evidence or to create a false impression of what really happened to his gear, making it look more like he just geared up and disappeared in the water.
So, the foul play theory, whether murder or a cover-up of an accident, it accounts for the missing body, the manipulated scene, and even provides a chilling motive for a potential cover-up by employees or others connected to the spring. It seems to tie together many of the loose ends.
It does offer a framework that incorporates many of the anomalies, yes.
But what are the arguments against this theory? Are there any counterpoints that investigators would raise or evidence that contradicts it?
The main arguments against direct foul play, like murder, or the lack of direct physical evidence of a struggle, for instance. There were reportedly no signs of a physical altercation found near Ben's truck or anywhere else obvious he could have been attacked on land.
No blood, no signs of a fight.
Nothing like that was reported. You'd typically expect some sign in a violent encounter. Additionally, the employees who last saw Ben, including Eduardo Taran, reportedly passed lie detector tests administered by the police.
The polygraphs. How reliable are those, though?
Well, polygraph tests are not infallible, and crucially, they are not admissible as evidence in court for that reason. However, these results, or the lack of direct leads coming from them, apparently led to no further official action being taken against the employees in connection to the disappearance itself.
So no smoking gun pointing directly at them either.
Exactly. While theories about a cover-up abound, there's no direct, concrete, undisputed evidence of an altercation or a murder taking place. It remains speculative, albeit compellingly so, based on the circumstantial evidence.
So, despite the lack of direct proof of murder, this foul play theory, especially the cover-up angle, gains significant traction from the convergence of all these highly suspicious elements. The manipulated tank evidence, the conviction of the private investigator, that troubling background of the former owner. It truly seems to best account for the complete absence of Ben's body and the clearly altered scene. It suggests a deliberate effort to obscure the true events, making it a compelling, albeit unproven, explanation for this enduring mystery.
It forces us to seriously consider that the simplest explanation, a straightforward accident, simply doesn't hold up under scrutiny. The scene, as it was discovered, seems to tell a much more complex and perhaps, more sinister story.
The case of Ben McDaniel is it's truly riddled with these contradictions and unanswered questions that continue to fuel speculation, making it one of the most enduring mysteries in the diving world.
It really is a classic example.
We've talked about the cadaver dog's hit on the water, for instance. Ben's family saw it as strong evidence he was in the cave, a definitive sign.
Understandably so from their perspective.
Well, experts, however, they question the reliability of that specific dog group, noting that dogs can alert for various reasons, pleasing handlers, excitement, residual sense. It leaves that particular piece of evidence in this frustrating gray area.
Ambiguous at best.
Then there's that stark contrast we keep coming back to. Ben's reported optimism and future plans versus his profound personal and financial struggles. That psychological paradox still hangs so heavy over the case.
It does. It creates a significant contradiction that could, theoretically, motivate a desperate act, like suicide or staging a disappearance, or it could simply be masking something else entirely. We just don't know what was truly in his head.
And that leads directly to the critical, persistent scrutiny on the Vortex Spring employees, particularly Eduardo Terran.
Their actions or inactions are central.
The central unanswered question remains. Why did Eduardo Terran choose to unlock that gate for an uncertified diver? Despite knowing Ben had previously forced entry, despite the strict safety protocols born from past fatalities, why?
Was it solely out of concern for Ben's immediate safety getting tangled, as he stated? Or were there other factors? Maybe wanting to avoid an argument or avoid damage to the gate? We don't have a definitive answer.
And while the employees reportedly passed those lie detector tests, suggesting maybe they weren't directly involved in a premeditated act right at the moment of disappearance.
Right, that's what the test suggested.
The theory of them maybe finding Ben later, panicking and manipulating the scene, or moving a body to avoid bad publicity for the spring. That persists in speculative discussions, doesn't it?
It absolutely persists. And that 2-day delay in noticing Ben's truck provided a crucial, invaluable window for such potential actions to occur undetected.
It gave them time.
It certainly provided an opportunity. Their stated reason for unlocking the gate, fearing Ben would get tangled up and drown if he forced entry. It presents this profound moral and professional dilemma that had severe consequences, regardless of the intent behind it.
Even if their goal was to prevent harm right then, their action directly circumvented safety protocols designed to prevent exactly this kind of tragedy.
Precisely. It opened the door to everything that followed. Their subsequent role, the actions taken or not taken, and the lingering suspicions, despite official clearances. They remain a central, unresolved aspect of the case, fueling those theories of a desperate cover-up.
It's that deliberate act of enabling entry into a restricted, known, dangerous area that simply can't be ignored no matter what came after. It feels like a point of no return in the story.
A critical decision point with massive ramifications.
And then there's the overwhelming, undeniable significance of those anomalous tank discoveries. We've called them the smoking gun for a reason. They just, don't fit any simple narrative.
Yeah, the recovered tanks found with normal air at unusual locations near the entrance and way deep inside, some lacking regulators are highly inconsistent with a standard accidental deep cave dive, or even a planned suicide dive using proper procedures.
So they remain the most compelling piece of physical evidence.
Arguably, yes. They strongly point away from a simple drowning scenario. Its highly anomalous nature, the wrong gas for the depth, the weird placement, the missing components, it strongly suggests deliberate action.
By Ben or by someone else.
Exactly. Deliberate action to create a false impression of a dive accident. This makes it a critical piece of evidence that demands an explanation beyond simple negligence or misfortune. The unanswered question remains: who had the motive and opportunity to manipulate this evidence, and why?
Was it to hide the suicide? To fake a disappearance? Or to cover up something far more sinister, like a murder or an accidental death they didn't want reported?
Those are the core questions the tanks force us to ask.
And as if this mystery wasn't tragic and complex enough, it was tragically compounded by another death, wasn't it? A death directly linked to the search for Den. Can you tell us about the Larry Higginbotham incident? Because it adds another layer of just awful human cost to this unresolved mystery.
It's a truly heartbreaking development in an already tragic story. The reward money, initially $10,000 offered by Ben's desperate parents for information leading to his recovery.
Right, they're desperate for answers.
Understandably. But that reward tragically led to another experienced diver, Larry Higginbotham, dying in the cave in 2012.
While searching for Ben.
He was reportedly searching for Ben's body, possibly driven by the reward, or perhaps just a personal quest to solve the mystery or help the family.
Oh, that's awful.
This devastating event caused significant uproar in the diving community. People were horrified. And it ultimately led to the reward being rescinded by the McDaniels, as they realized the immense danger it was inadvertently posing.
So his death was seen as a direct consequence of the reward.
By many, yes. a direct, tragic, and perhaps foreseeable consequence of the family's desperate search for closure. It underscores the extreme and persistent danger of the Vortex Spring cave, even for experienced divers like Higginbotham.
And it highlights the ethical issues, too.
Absolutely. It highlights the profound ethical dilemmas faced by the diving community when financial incentives are offered for such high-risk searches in dangerous environments. Many highly experienced cave divers had actually declined to search for Ben initially, precisely because of the inherent safety concerns.
So Higginbotham's death kind of validated those concerns.
In the worst possible way. The rescinding of the reward after his death showed a recognition of this perilous dynamic. This event reinforces the inherent danger of Vortex Spring and the profound, sometimes destructive impact of unresolved grief.
And it also makes it seem even less likely that Ben's body is just sitting somewhere easily reachable, doesn't it?
It strongly reinforces the idea that if Ben is still in that cave, he is likely in an exceptionally dangerous or truly unrecoverable location, making further volunteer search efforts highly unlikely and perhaps unjustifiable.
So Ben's disappearance didn't just create its own profound mystery, but it actually led to another tragic loss, another life claimed by the very same depths. It just underscores the lethal nature of that environment and the desperate lengths people will go to find answers, or maybe money.
It's a cruel, compounding twist to an already baffling and heartbreaking case, a stark reminder of the very real dangers that exist in these complex environments and the devastating human cost of unresolved questions.
So wrapping this up, the disappearance of Ben McDaniel really remains one of the most enduring mysteries in diving history. It's characterized by this complex web of contradictory evidence and these compelling, yet ultimately unproven theories.
No easy answers here.
While accidental drowning is, a theoretical possibility given Ben's uncertified status and the known dangers of Vortex Spring.
Right, it's the default assumption initially.
The persistent, baffling lack of a body, despite those exhaustive searches by top divers and those highly anomalous equipment findings, especially the tanks, they significantly undermine any simple accident theory.
They really do. The absence of Ben's body suggests either an exceptionally inaccessible location deep within the cave, or, perhaps more disturbingly, that his body was never in the cave to begin with, or was removed from it somehow.
Then the suicide theory. It's complicated by Ben's reported optimism and his strong family ties, which seem to contradict a suicidal mindset, creating that deep psychological paradox we keep mentioning.
Although his profound personal struggles certainly provide a potential, albeit unconfirmed, motive for a desperate act, it just doesn't quite align with his outwardly projected future plans right before he vanished.
And the staged disappearance theory. While it's initially attractive because of his financial difficulties and maybe the evidence of scene manipulation with the tanks,
It'd have that major flaw.
it faces that significant challenge. Why did he leave behind substantial cash and his cell phone? Items that would be absolutely crucial for starting a new life. It makes a simple escape seem unlikely.
However, the manipulated tank evidence certainly lends some credibility to the idea that the scene was deliberately altered to appear as a diving accident. The question is, by whom? Ben himself, or someone else covering up something different?
But when we pull all these threads together, when we really weigh the evidence and its inherent contradictions, foul play potentially involving a subsequent cover-up, it truly emerges as arguably the strongest contender among the explanations, doesn't it?
It seems to fit the most pieces, yes, even without direct proof. This theory is powerfully supported by the suspicious nature of the recovered tanks, which just scream misdirection.
And the PI's belief.
The firm belief of the private investigator hired by the family, and that unsettling background of the former dive park owner with his own legal issues and suspicious death, it all adds weight.
It just seems to best account for the apparent scene manipulation and, most importantly, the complete puzzling absence of Ben's body.
Ultimately, the case remains unresolved, primarily because of the contradictory nature of the available evidence. The complete lack of a body, despite those extensive expert-led searches, is paramount. And there's an inability to definitively prove any single theory beyond reasonable doubt.
Each leading theory presents compelling points, but also faces significant counter-arguments.
And the ambiguous actions of the dive park employees, plus the suspicious circumstances surrounding the former owner, they just add layers of complexity without providing any clear, irrefutable resolution. It's a murky picture.
And so, the Ben McDaniel case stands as this powerful, haunting testament to the profound challenges of investigating disappearances in complex natural environments. Especially when every piece of evidence seems to tell a different story.
Hmm.
When human motivations, everything from grief and despair to maybe negligence and potentially even malice, intertwine so deeply with the cold, hard facts or lack thereof.
It's a perfect storm of uncertainty.
So what does the Ben McDaniel case truly teach us? Maybe about the limits of investigation, the limits of what we can ever truly know, and the enduring, often agonizing power of the unknown. It's a question that continues to echo through the crystal clear yet infinitely dark depths of Vortex Spring.